Welcome into a Tuesday edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Tyler Yaremchuck and Frank Seravalli with you. The show, as always, a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. And the show coming to you from another different location, Frank. And this one is top tier. And by top, I mean we got a great perched up view out at Banner's Kitchen and Tap. The vibes in here, even though it's early in the day, the vibes in here are awesome, and you can get a look at what we're dealing with here. They have absolutely hooked us up with the Nation Network Espresso Martini for after the show. The food looks unbelievable as well.
Man, are you kidding me? Putting a slab of bacon in front of me, hanging it, I don't know if I can get through the show.
Shout out to our friends at Banners here. Again, steps away from TD Garden, basically right attached to it. It is the ultimate spot if you're not just a Boston sports fan, but any sports fan. I'm looking behind us, Frank. That is a 40-foot LED screen. That is the largest TV in the entire Northeast region, and they have over 30 additional TVs around the bar.
We're sitting in front of 3 golf simulators and may or may not have been in the lead up with a couple other shows that we've been doing, taking a couple swings.
I kind of like doing our show prep while you and I are working on our short games a little bit here and hitting a few irons. But anyways, Banners, absolutely electric. Can't thank them enough for having us here this week. Excited to have Ryan S. Clark from ESPN on the show in a few minutes, as well as the rematch is set at the Four Nations Faceoff. And even, Frank, while there are no games happening today, somehow there's still drama in this tournament. So let's begin there with the injury report. Breaking news on breaking news on breaking news. Charlie McAvoy out of the tournament. Let's start there.
Yeah, so the Boston Bruins confirming or announcing this morning that McAvoy is ruled out for Thursday's game. Sources told me that he had a minor injury on Saturday that then had an infection that stemmed from it, requiring him to be hospitalized on Monday night here in Boston. Just a situation that got progressively worse and worse. And he's fine now. And the doctors figured out what it was, threw a bunch of meds at it, and he's on the mend. But certainly a scary situation for Charlie McAvoy, swelling, fluids that build up. It was just an ugly situation. So unfortunate for him. I don't think, wearing his gear and the sweat and all those things that contribute to getting an infection put him in a tough spot and puts him in a brutal spot to have to miss out on this all-important rematch, especially in his home barn here in Boston. So, feel for Charlie McAvoy. And then on the other end of that is the elation that someone like Quinn Hughes is probably feeling today. Mike Sullivan announcing moments ago that Quinn Hughes is en route to Boston to rejoin Team USA as a potential injury replacement. Now, this situation, that's why I keep looking at my phone, is incredibly fluid. Here's the thing. It's not entirely clear at this moment in time whether or not Quinn Hughes coming back is eligible to play on Thursday.
Similar to the Thomas Harley situation, he was ultimately allowed to because Cale Makar was sick.
Correct. But that's because they had dropped down below 6 defensemen. Unless there's something else at play here and there's another defenseman that's banged up, which we don't know about, the U.S. has 6 defensemen right now. So this situation has flipped. There's a lot to figure out. And I'm telling you that this is so fluid because in the last hour, 1 hour ago, the U.S. was told that they couldn't add anyone. So the NHL and NHLPA have gotten together and have made a decision here that Quinn Hughes can rejoin. And I don't know if it's a different situation because he was originally named to the roster when they were handed out on December 4th. Nonetheless, an incredible turn of events because to me, that's one of the big game changers from Saturday's game to now is Cale Makar is back for Team Canada. And man, did they look like a different team with Cale Makar on the ice against Finland to close out the round robin. So they get one of the best defensemen in the world back. And if the U.S. can somehow, some way match that and sub out McAvoy for Quinn Hughes, who's been playing at a Hart Trophy level, man, the stakes, the intensity, everything that's adding on to this brick by brick, incredible.
Yeah, it's, again, as things are continuing to develop, it's guys are in, guys are out. I don't know how it's going to play out. We have a couple more days, obviously, until the championship game here at the Four Nations Face-Off. Just quickly on Team USA, Kachuk, Matthews. Those are 3 guys. 2 of them didn't play yesterday at all. 1 of them didn't finish the game in Brady. What do you think their statuses are ahead? Do you think it's a safe bet that all 3 play?
I would lean that way based on the stakes and what's on the line here. However, the player that I would have the most concern for would be Matthew Tkachuk, but seeing him in the building yesterday, he made an appearance on TNT during the game. I can tell you, seeing the way that he walked out of Bell Center on Saturday night and how ginger that was, it was a totally different, it was a 180 in 48 hours for him. So he looked to be walking much better. I believe it to be a soft tissue injury for Matthew Tkachuk, whether it's a groin or a hamstring, whatever it might be. Is 5 days enough time to get that to heal? I'm not certain, but I don't have any concern about Brady Tkachuk. I think that was more precautionary than anything. Tough to leave the U.S. with 16 skaters last night to finish off their round robin, but I think it was a necessary evil based on, frankly, where their roster is at this moment in time. And with Austin Matthews, another potential wild card, because the team officially called it upper body soreness, according to Mike Sullivan. But everyone, I think, and no one is 100% sure if it's related, but it seems like it might be connected to that injury that Austin Matthews has been dealing with all season long. So not overly concerned, but I would say moving forward, I would bet on all three players being in, but I don't think anything at this moment in time is a guarantee, and I wouldn't stamp it, underline it, or write it in Sharpie.
Can I share with you one from the conspiracy theory aisle of things? The Boston Bruins were the team that announced Charlie McAvoy would be out for the tournament. Don Sweeney's their GM, so Canada's GM, and then US's. And it's just interesting how that all
does get
out.
all messy, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's like, okay, so Canada's GM is announcing that USA's best remaining defenseman is not eligible for the rest of the tournament. Very, very confusing. But that's the Four Nations face-off, Frank. You never really know what's going on.
Well, and to be honest, as I wrote late last week, the rules have been fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And they did make an exception at the exact moment in time. Cale Makar, he was sick, but they still had 6 defensemen technically. Yeah. So he couldn't end up playing. And it's a good thing that Thomas Harley was brought in. And the NHL and NHLPA had said from the beginning that they're going to do the right thing. They want to make sure that these teams aren't in a spot, particularly with a rivalry game and what's on the line, that they force a team to go out there and play a game with 5 defensemen. That's not fair. No one has suggested that that's fair. But to be fair, the rules have changed.
Yeah, they have. We're going to continue that conversation about the Canada-USA matchup a little bit later on with Ryan S. Clark. But for now, Frank, let's bid farewell to Sweden at this tournament. They end their tournament with a win, but it's not enough for them to get to the final. They lose out on the tiebreaker to Team Canada. And, when we put a bow on Team Finland's tournament the other day, we were kind of like, hey, they were as advertised. They came, they fought hard. Ultimately, that blue line just couldn't quite hold off the offensive attacks from Canada and USA. When you look at Sweden, they come out with one win here. Was their tournament as advertised, or is it maybe a bit more disappointing?
I think it's way more disappointing. Given what Finland was dealing with on their back end, to lose that rivalry game, I think is hugely disappointing for the Swedes. And yeah, they played everyone kind of pretty tight for the most part. That said, I think people expected more. And in the end, the bitter taste that Sweden leaves this tournament with, not getting to the championship game is one thing, but it's another thing to also at the same time lose to your rival. And that's what's going to sting. I gave Finland an A for their tournament, a flat out A, because they won the rivalry game. Yeah, there were a couple games that weren't close, but with what they were dealing with, that wasn't a Stanley Cup playoff roster on defense, let alone best on best internationally. Sweden, I give a C. I think that's where they were at for their tournament. Not nearly good enough, and they had more than that and just didn't get enough from it.
Ended up having to use all 3 goaltenders in this tournament too. Like there were a handful of things that didn't go their way.
Sam Ersson played pretty good last night.
He actually really did. But we talked coming into the tournament, Frank, that at least my concern for them, like the blue line's so good. They had guys who were interesting on the wings, but it was like, okay, down the middle, can you get a throwback performance from Mika Zibanejad? Can you get a coming out party in a way, I guess, coming out of his shell party for Elias Pettersson? Neither of those really happened. Zibanejad was okay, and Pettersson was, like, to put it blunt, he was flat out bad in this tournament. And those are 2 guys who had to be difference makers for them.
Totally agree. And I think the fascinating part of this conversation, as you look at Elias Pettersson's tournament, I mean, sub 10 minutes in the last game, 9:54, I think, or 9:46.
Barely played in the third period.
Yeah, it played 2 shifts
Yeah.
in the third. I think it significantly damages his trade value. I think the rest of the league was kind of looking at this tournament. Let's get him out of the Vancouver bubble. Let's get him out of that situation and see if playing with his countrymen, maybe some familiarity, does he find his confidence again? And not only did he not find his confidence, I think in some ways displayed a confidence that was so badly shaken. The way he threw pucks away, the way that he flubbed on shots. I mean, I don't want to hear again from anyone, like never again, about Elias Pettersson and how much he's playing good defense. That's not why you make $11.6 million bucks. No one's paying you for that. We can get a guy that makes $1.8 million bucks to go play defense. That's not it. So the bar is different for Pettersson. He was supposed to find it. His Swedish teammates told us that we would see a different Elias Pettersson. We saw the same, and we saw the same that we've seen for the last calendar year.
Yeah, the big guns just really didn't do it up front for Sweden, and obviously Pettersson leads that charge. This actually ties into my first this or that question for you. Frank, a couple of players who I really thought played well in this tournament. Erik Karlsson on the blue line. We joked last week. I was like, hey, he turned back the clock 10 years in that opening game against Canada. And someone who really impressed me was actually Rickard Rakell. I know he didn't get on the score sheet, but he was in the mix a lot, and I felt like at least I liked his physicality in this tournament. And as I was sitting there watching, I'm like, man, if I'm a contending team sitting there going, maybe I have cap space, but not a lot of assets. If I could get that guy out of Pittsburgh, maybe he could be a good playoff guy for me. This or that. Did either Karlsson or Rakell improve their trade value?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know about Karlsson just because the contract is so onerous and that cap hit. Does Pittsburgh really want to retain for that number of years? And that's the big thing about Rakell. If I'm Pittsburgh and I'm trying to retool things and I want to do what the Washington Capitals did to get back into contention and playoff mode, the surest way to do that is not by retaining salary. If you want to move these guys, if someone wants to take on Rickard Rakell from you at full boat and they're willing to give you some value, that's a different story. I'd also be wearing a Barry Bonds earring based on the bet on the DFO rundown, which I know you're rooting for. And you'd have to go back and find that episode in the bet when we talked about it. My prediction was that the Penguins don't move a guy that makes more than $5 million bucks without retaining. I think it's going to be difficult with that term. There's also a concussion history with Rakell. There's a lot of other parts to it, but he's looked like a really good player this season.
Yeah, again, I'd be very, very intrigued. I'd be very intrigued by that possibility ahead of the deadline. Second, this or that for you, and maybe we'll dub this one this, that, or the other thing, but 3 Maple Leafs in this tournament, and all 3 of them kind of having disappointing runs. Matthews now obviously out with the injuries. Mitch Marner had a good moment, but has yet to put forth a good game for Team Canada, and William Nylander was a bit of a non-factor as well for Sweden. Which one of those 3 Maple Leafs is the most disappointing to you? For me, at least,
that's
Marner,
a damn good question.
You can at least point to a moment and be like, hey,
right,
scored in overtime. If he doesn't score that, who knows how the tournament
Matthews
plays out.
has had a number of chances. I think he's hit
good defensive plays.
At least 3. Don't do it. You can't do it. I just said, I don't want to hear about good defensive play. That's not why he's getting paid.
He hasn't scored yet.
But he hasn't scored yet. And beyond that, he has had some moments, hit at least 3 posts, it feels like, a crossbar. So he's had looks, but he hasn't dominated. And that's the one thing you're looking for with these guys. Connor McDavid has had stretches where he's flat out dominated. Nathan McKinnon has had stretches where he's dominated. Cale Makar did the same thing on Monday against Finland. He's dominated. I haven't seen that from Matthews, haven't seen that from Marner, and definitely didn't see that from Nylander. And when you're talking about that level of player, and you're talking about dispelling the notion that in big moments, you're going to rise to the very top, I don't think anyone's done enough to create an argument that they're going to take something from this tournament and apply it to a Toronto Maple Leafs playoff run. However, there is one game left. It's the most important game. You find a way in that game, maybe they totally flip the narrative.
And that ties in perfectly to our zero in, Frank. We're going to dial it in on a couple of things today, tomorrow, and then obviously Thursday for our big preview. But one thing I wanted to talk about specifically with Canada, their big guns came alive against Finland. The goals from McKinnon, you got Connor McDavid getting on the board early and setting the tone. I know a lot of people are saying this final game on Thursday, expect it to be low scoring, whatever. I just doubt that Canada has the ability to win this game 2-1. I think if Canada's going to win, they're going to need 3 or 4 goals. The big guns should be able and will need to be able to supply some of that. But I'm looking at Canada's bottom 6 as a massive X factor in this thing. Brad Marchand was not Brad Marchand on Saturday night at the Bell Center. He wasn't a pest. He wasn't flying around. And I think he looked better against Finland, but I think he needs another level going into the final against Team USA. And same thing for Mitch Marner. He has the skill to change a game in one play. He can do it. It's in him. He hasn't done it on the big stage yet in his career. But again, this is maybe a chance to change that narrative a little bit. I'm looking at those two guys in Canada's bottom six and going, if one of them can have a game-changing moment, Canada's chances to win skyrocket, because I believe that 97, 29, and 87 will get theirs in some way. Can the bottom six steal something?
Can you find a way to contribute in some way? Yeah. I think it's a tremendous point, which brings me to my point, which is Braden Point. I mean, we've got the lines up here on the screen. I don't think it's a reach to say that Braden Point is the linchpin to Canada's win on Thursday if they're going to get one. Because think about how the third period played out against the Americans. John Cooper took every line combo that he could possibly think of, written on a million different cocktail napkins, probably since the summer, and threw them all on the ice at the Bell Center for everyone to see. Couldn't find something that stuck. Braden Point on Monday appeared to stick. And if they can just nail that down, and you could just cross that off the list and say, that's solved. We've got our combo with Connor McDavid, Zach Hyman, not here. That could have worked. But if you've got something with Point, who has demonstrated and shown in his career that he can play alongside the very best in the world in Nikita Kucherov, if he can do that here with Connor McDavid, it's just one less thing to worry about. So that's what I'd zero in on for today. That would be a huge moment for Canada. Yeah, but the bottom six, you need more drivers, less passengers. And that's what we saw on Saturday for Canada. Too many passengers.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Let's continue along with the show and get to our big segment for the day. It's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, where you can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks through Charm and their Masterpiece program. For the big moment in your life, head to Charm Diamond Centers. Find out more information at charmdiamondcenters.com. As we welcome in one of my favorite people in the hockey media world. It's Ryan S. Clark from ESPN joining us live from the TD Garden here in Boston. And Ryan, I want to start, and there's a couple different areas I want to go to, but your piece the other day about kind of where Connor Hellebuyck ranks amongst all-time American goalies. He is currently the odds-on favorite to be the MVP at this tournament. And when you look at his career, the regular season numbers, the regular season accolades, they're all there, but he's never had that big moment in a Team USA sweater. This tournament is his first chance to do so. How has he lived up to the hype, and where does he rank amongst all-time American goalies in your eyes?
Sure. In terms of sort of what this moment can do for him, it's absolutely massive, because with them all-time American goalies, whether it's been Richter, Ryan Miller, they've all had these big moments in international play that have sort of let people know and understand how important they've been to Team USA's success. And with Connor Hellebuyck in this tournament, he's been immense, especially when you look at the situation with injuries, especially when you look at the situation with sort of how they play this really tight game. And so to have a goaltender like Connor Hellebuyck, it's been absolutely immense. And in terms of where he ranks, it's going to be so hard to say where he ranks all time until his career's over. But right now, he's very much in the discussion. And if he wins a third Vezina, he'll be the first American to ever do that. And at that point, he'll be in a conversation with people like Patrick Waugh and Dominic Hasek and Martin Brodeur, and that is immense.
So just to quickly follow up on that, I think, again, coming into this tournament, we've talked about this a lot, but this Four Nations face-off had its detractors. And I think there would have been people who said, okay, sure, Connor Hellebuyck plays good. Maybe he even wins MVP, but who cares? But since we've gotten here and gotten the tournament rolling, it's grown in significance. So does this big performance do anything to push him past other names on the list? Like, has this tournament began to feel more significant to you in that sort of historical context?
You know, it's hard to say, just because as it's grown, there's been more of an appreciation for it. But it's still going to be maybe one of those things where once he gets to an Olympics, once he gets to a World Cup of hockey, that could be one of those moments. But then in addition to international play, it's the big question of him in the postseason. And that's just what it's always been. And so talking to different goalies like Mike Richter, Jonathan Quick, who've won cups, who are two of America's all-time greats, they and others are of the opinion that you don't necessarily need a cup to be an all-time great or to even be the greatest of all time. But having that cup, it's not the worst thing to have on a resume, and neither is having a major performance in an international tournament.
All right, Ryan. So you're downstairs at TD Garden. You just were part of Mike Sullivan's media availability. Can you share with us what was said about Quinn Hughes? And is there any clarity yet on his availability? Is he eligible to play on Thursday? He's en route, but what does that mean?
Yes, he's coming. And in terms of clarity, no, there wasn't really much of any clarity. So it seems like it's something that it's going to be developing over the next 48 hours. Of course, there's the precedent that Canada set with Thomas Harley. But as far as things right now, yes, Quinn Hughes is coming. Whether or not we'll see him in the lineup, that is let's say that's the $100 million question.
Yeah, no doubt. I just wondering if you could give us some perspective on what you think Thursday's game means as a whole for the sport, because we've now seen the White House tweet about it. We've seen football shows lead off their shows talking about Saturday's game. We see non-hockey people that don't watch, don't care, don't like it, all of a sudden interested. And there's many layers to this. But what do you think, with so many eyeballs on the game on Thursday night, what it's going to mean for hockey?
Look, it's immense just because everybody's competing for eyeballs in sports. I mean, even with something like the NFL, as big as the NFL was, as much as people talk about Taylor Swift, she has a fan base, and that meant more eyes for the NFL. Whereas if you're looking at the NHL, the Miracle on Ice is this nation's seminal sporting moment, but yet in some ways it never was able to really capture that growth in a way that basketball did with the 92 Dream Team. And so when you're looking at an event like this, especially as you get closer to the trade deadline into the playoffs, it's one of those things where hockey can use it as a launching point. And given Milano Corteza is coming up very, very soon, it's another one of those sort of jumping off points for hockey that could be really, really immense in the United States. Is the NHL is trying to compete for eyeballs with every major professional sports league as well as every major collegiate conference there is. Because think about this past weekend. You had the Daytona 500. You had some top college basketball games, that yet the number one thing everyone was talking about, in addition to the NBA All-Star game, was the four nations with Canada and the United States. If you can get more of that, that's going to be big.
So with that, though, in order to truly capitalize on that, does the U.S. need to win, or just playing this game, this rematch against Canada, does that do enough?
You would think they would need to win because we've talked about it before, frankly. Men's hockey is one of those last frontiers America isn't the best in the world at when it comes to a sport. It's why people feel so passionately about soccer. They've seen women's soccer grow to being the best or one of the best. They're trying to see that with men's soccer, and with American men's hockey, like, it's clear and they're in the top two, but winning this tournament, it adds to that discussion of, are they number one? They won at the Olympics. It's the same thing. And the thing is because America is a place where, while people keep up with the World Juniors, it's not like Canada. If you can get a win like this on a platform like the Four Nations and then take it into the Olympics, it could be massive.
Which result produces a better storyline heading into the Olympics, though? Because I do think, as much as you talk about the win helping grow the game, like, there's in sports an element of, like, heartbreak breeds diehard fandom. Sometimes watching your team gets crushed makes you want it even more. So does Canada winning and being like, we're still number one, is that a more intriguing storyline going into 2026? Or is it USA going, hold up, maybe we are the best hockey country in the world? Like, which one would be more interesting, I guess, to watch play out?
I think that depends on the perspective, doesn't it? Because
I guess
seeing Canada, I mean, in all seriousness, seeing Canada be number one is something that people are used to seeing. But seeing something new with the United States, where it's sort of been, you've been close but not there, and to be there, especially with everything going on in the way this sport is growing and materializing with development, it can make things really, really interesting, especially because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 12 months with Canada's goaltending, the U.S.'s situation. Like, how much better do Sweden and Finland get? So, again, you never know.
Interesting stuff, Ryan. Always appreciate your time, man. Thanks for popping on. Everyone in the chat, you can read his work over at ESPN. Follow him on Twitter, Ryan S. Clark. Ryan, enjoy the game Thursday. There you go, Ryan S. Clark from ESPN. Let's move along to our hashtag Ask DFO question, Frank. It's brought to you by our friends at JP Wisers. JP Wisers offering Canadian hockey fans a premium drink choice, not just for game night, but any night. So Thursday night, when you kick your feet up and you get ready to watch one of the most anticipated games we've seen in the last week since the one we saw last Saturday, pour up a JP Wisers, the official whiskey of the NHL, the official whiskey of game night. And Frank, we got a couple of Ask DFOs in the chat.
While you're scrolling, I'm going to give a quick update. Pierre LeBrun from The Athletic just reporting that NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly had said the same rules apply for Quinn Hughes that applied to Thomas Harley. So he can fly to Boston, he can be around the team, but he cannot participate in practice, and he cannot play on Thursday unless there is someone that is eligible to play that cannot.
So it doesn't have to be a defenseman. If a forward bows out, they could go 11-7. You can't let them make them play short. I know. I mean, hey,
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but yeah, that would be an interesting sort of other element to this that I will follow up on once I stop talking into a microphone, because it's been nonstop this morning.
Look at me giving good ideas. We did have some NHL news from today. The Vancouver Canucks announced that Drew O'Connor gets a 2-year, $2.5 million extension. That changed your view of the trade now that both Pettersson and O'Connor are signed? I kind of look at it and go like, you dumped off the contracts you dumped off because they were bottom 6 players making
too much, right?
And then you signed Drew O'Connor for $2.5 million, and I'm like, why?
It doesn't change anything for me. I think they're chasing their tail a little bit, and I think that they feel like it changes the trade perspective for them because they got these aren't rentals. That said, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but they're really happy with Marcus Pettersson so far. I hope they continue to be happy. Yeah. I'll leave it at that.
That's totally fair. Let's move along to our daily bets brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today and use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank, we'll dig into a few other things as we go throughout our next couple of shows here, but let me just start with sort of a nice, easy one when we look at the opening lines for that game on Thursday, brought to you by Bet365. Canada, slight underdogs at -105. USA coming in at -115. Is that the right read to you? Do you agree? Because Canada were slight favorites at home. So is that just the home ice flips it? Or do you think the Americans, after coming off a win and being at home, deserve to be maybe slightly bigger favorites in this?
I'm torn because, look, my prediction the whole time has been US would win the first game and lose the championship to Canada. And I still feel that way. That would still be the same prediction that I would make today. That said, I also think the U.S. delivered a statement not just by punching the Canadians in the face, quite literally off the puck drop, but by the way they played that game, by the way they shut down Canada's vaunted attack, by the stops that Connor Hellebuyck made, and by the way, from some of the shakiness that Jordan Binnington has displayed in this tournament, I would think that they'd be slightly bigger favorites shifting to home ice. We joked the other day that these odds kind of seem to be like in the NFL where the home team automatically gets 3 points. That's kind of what that felt like. But in this case, I don't know. I mean, it's probably quite literally a coin flip.
I really do think it is. And since the show started, the lines shifted as well. It's now a dead even -110 on either side. We'll talk MVP. We'll talk about some goal scorers later on in the week as well. But let's wrap up today's show with a little bit of garbage time. And again, the theme, not to beat a dead horse, it's the growth of the game, seeing people get involved in the sport who usually wouldn't be. And how about soon-to-be Ryder Cup captain Keegan Bradley pulling up to TGL yesterday,
Thursday
for the Golfton League.
Team USA,
look at that, rocking a nice clean USA
the
sweater.
Kachuk brothers.
And
USA
music
and Canada.
So
Let's
good.
go. Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern,
This
ESPN.
is my point that I've been making about what this means to the rest of the world, the sporting world at large. How often are you going to see that? How often are you going to see, people tuning in just to see hockey? And massive moment for ESPN, massive moment for the NHL, and for the sport in this country. If you can, even a slight uptick in player participation, new rinks being built, whatever comes on the back end of, it's not going to be just one game, but if you can stack the Olympics on top of it and continued success, I just think it's such a game changer.
Absolutely. All right, that is a wrap. We got 2 more shows to get ready for the big game on Thursday, tomorrow, and Thursday at noon Eastern. So we look forward to seeing you then. If you're new to the YouTube, hit that subscribe button, because not only are we live every day at noon Eastern time, but our friends Johnny Lazarus, Colby Cohn, they go live Morning Cup of Hockey at 9 a.m. as well. So we really do got you covered for your mornings around the hockey world. That'll be a wrap from Banners just outside the TD Garden. I am going pretzel with the beer cheese, and I'm definitely having a slice of this bacon, Frank.
Oh, like I said, I don't know how I was able to focus. I'm like, the whole time I'm like,
little espresso martini too. Don't tell the bosses, but I might have a sip as well. Big shout out to Banners for hosting us. Big shout out to everyone who watched. Our producer Pat Puff for doing great work behind the scenes as well. That's a wrap on today's edition of the show. We'll see you again tomorrow at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you like that video, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Daily Faceoff YouTube because we have tons of great content, from exclusive interviews on the sheet with Jeff Merrick to instant analysis and breaking news with our Daily Faceoff insider, Frank Seravalli, on Daily Faceoff Live, to your go-to morning duo, Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohen, on Morning Cup of Hockey. Plenty of great content, wall-to-wall, team-to-team, all the way across the entire league. And you won't miss it if you subscribe.